Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the Brass Junkies. I am your host, Andrew Hitz, and I am joined by my co-host with better internet than I currently have, Lance LaDuke. Lance, how are you?
I'm struck with how sleepy both of us look, but
Yeah.
otherwise,
uh,
I'm fine. I'm enjoying
I
my
am
better
up.
internet.
I am up at my parents' summer house, and my dog and their dog haven't seen each other in a long time. And my dog woke me up trying to get to the other dog like 6 times between 5 and 7 a.m. this morning. So that was cool. That was super cool. Love dog. I do love dog. But I was not loving this particular one, who's been a member of my family for 10 years, between 5 and 7 a.m. this morning. So, yeah. Other than that, how did you enjoy the play? So this was an awesome conversation with Michael Sachs.
Really fun. Yeah.
Yeah.
This was a
Yeah.
great time.
Really, really great. He's so easy to talk to, and it's fun, but also just he's thought about a lot of stuff for a lot of time, which
We'll
is
get
great.
into it. The lifelong learner, the curiosity thing is it's apparent with him, and it's just awesome stories. And I mean, actually, another thing that really strikes me is, and we didn't do him any favors in this regard, but he's much more willing and interested in talking about other, like Sam and Gould and Pandolfi and other people than he is talking about himself. And we kind of let it go in that direction. And there were times I was like, well, dang, we need to be getting more information out of him. But the information was awesome. It just was, I think, an indication of the kind of person that he is, that it was like, credit this person, credit that one, credit that one.
Yep. Yeah, for sure. Speaking of lifelong learners, this Saturday, June 12th, I am hosting a very special Inside the Practice Room with Rex Richardson.
Wow.
Trumpet superstar. He's given an exclusive.
Hey, come on into my practice room. I'll show you. This is where I gargle.
I actually asked Rex if he would do it, and he said, "Nah, Hitz, I'm done doing your stupid live events." So Lance is actually, with his camera off, is just going to fill in for Rex the entire time.
Yo, cats.
No, but in all seriousness, 2 p.m.
awesome.
Eastern. Rex is going to give us an exclusive look into his impending book, 100 Days of Trumpet Practice. We're going to do a deep dive into Rex's practicing process, about like how long he practices, how many practice sessions per day, his goal setting, whether he plans out his practice sessions or not, whether his routine is set, all of that. And and he's going to give us a sneak peek into the book. So if you use the offer code 100 days at hitsacademy.com, then you can get into this thing for only $19. And also it'll be available in the Hitz Academy archives long term. So even if you can make it live, you'll be able to watch it as many times as you want after that. Or if you can't make it live, then it'll be there for you. So hitsacademy.com, Rex Richardson, Saturday, June 12th at 2 p.m. Offer code 100 days. So I'm really looking, and is that Parker Mouthpieces offer, oh geez, I was trying to do this from memory because I'm like outside, as you can see. Parker Mouthpieces provides the hosting for the Brass Junkies. Also provides what is it? It's like customizable component mouthpieces for horn, trombone, tuba, viola, and timpani. And you can find out, euphonium, including the Lance LaDuke model euphonium mouthpiece and the Andrew Hitz artist model tuba mouthpiece. I of course remember that little.
How did
wrinkle.
They get the little quote signs around artist small enough to fit on the mouthpiece cup?
You can find out more at parkermouthpieces.com or follow them on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. I also wanted to plug, if you go to the Relics, RELIX, then you can actually see the third day of the Mockingbird sessions, which the Mockingbird Foundation is a charity that I'm on the board of. we had this huge 3-day streamed event, and I hosted a panel discussion about the impact of music educators on a number of professional musicians, and those included Joe Alessi, who I had on, who's a trombone player, if you never heard of him. Chanel Critchlow, who is a tuba player and producer and writer. Mike Nickens, so 3 former guests of the Brass Junkies, who all evidently did not remember how painful it was to talk to me last time, and they all said yes. And then also Zach Brock of Snarky Puppy, and Don Hart, who's the incredible arranger and writer from Nashville. So it was there was some like deep stuff. Yeah, really, really great. Just talking all about the importance of music educators and of keeping access to music education. You can find out more about that at ember.org.
And 2 more plugs. Patrick Sheridan's event next week. So starts a week from, we're recording this on the 7th. So it starts a week from today, the 14th through the 18th. Is that what it is? I guess so.
Sounds good. We do an extended plug for that in the outro.
And since you mentioned Chanel, go check out Hustle and Horns on YouTube. Chanel's a force of nature, man. Just so cool. So check out her most recent episodes. Only been up for about a week, so go check that out too.
And you can find all of her Hustle and Horns episodes at pedalnotemedia.com. Without further ado, let us get to the wonderful conversation that we had with principal trumpet of the Cleveland Orchestra, Michael Sachs.
And today on the Brass Junkies, we are joined at long last by our very good friend. He is quite good at the trumpet, and his name is Michael Sachs. Michael, how are you?
Hey, great to see you guys. Thanks for having me on.
We already cracked him up. Well, yeah, he is quite good, right? I mean, that's
quite good.
So that's factual. I'd say that's a consensus opinion too.
That's a beautiful collection of toasters you have behind you.
No, they get warm, but they're not toasted. Some of my ham radio gear.
We're gonna circle back to that. I wish that everyone that is listening or watching could have heard the first 10 minutes of this, because Michael was downstairs in his studio, and he's got a nice mic, and he's got like a preamp, and he's got the whole thing, and for whatever reason his system was like making Lance and my voices echo loudly, and it was cool because Michael's hard to rattle, but it was just kind of like the heat was slowly turning up. So, and then he finally, actually, the best part is he said, all right, I'm going to log off and go upstairs. And so then it was like a few minutes, and then he logged back on, and it was in the exact same space. And Lance and I are both like, am I losing it or am I losing it? And then we try one more anyway. Here we are in his ham radio room, which we're going to talk about later, because my dad would be very upset if I didn't ask you about it. But first, I wanted to thank you for participating in our Sam Palafian tribute that we did back in October, around the time of his 70th birthday, and I wanted to make a plug for that because it was awesome. It's like a few hours of 20 people all giving tribute, including Michael here. But I wanted to have you talk just a little bit more. If you could tell us the story about how you and Sam first met, and about what it was like working with him at an early age.
No, I'd be honored to. I mean, look, anytime I could talk about Sam, it does my heart good. I mean, he was just such an incredible presence. I mean, an enormous presence in anyone's life who he touched. And I mean, in every way, his musicianship, personally, in every manner. I mean, for me, I first met Sam summer of '81. I was 19, and I went to the Empire Brass Quintet Symposium, and Sam happened to coach my group. And first of all, I hit it off with him right away. I mean, just his whole energy, just really was incredibly inspiring and captivating, and his musicianship. And I had never heard anybody sound like that on a tuba. I mean, he was doing things that, yeah, I couldn't do on a trumpet in a million Sundays. And, here he was in the tuba playing lower than you could imagine, higher than you can imagine, faster, softer, louder. I mean, the whole thing. And all within this unique voice that he had on the instrument. And it really was a transformative moment for me hearing him in the group and hearing the way he impacted the Empire Brass. A lot of times you didn't notice he was playing, but all of a sudden the group sounded completely different. Or he just the way he impacted on things. So he's coaching my group and he's being incredibly supportive. And at that point, I was still on the fence whether I was going to move forward and try to, give this a go and make a living at playing the trumpet and, try to become a trumpet player, or if I was going to go a different direction, go into business. And he was incredibly, supportive and encouraging and, man, you got to do this. You can do this. And, typical Sam. I mean, Sam could convince you to, jump off the Brooklyn Bridge. I mean, it can convince you of anything. And he kept talking about this buddy of his, Mark Gould, who's the principal in the Met, and how, man, I got to hook you up with Gould. You guys would get along so well. He'd love your playing. You really dig him. All this stuff. And then, I told him and I was going to go spend a couple of weeks with my cousin in the city right after the symposium at Tanglewood. And it just happened that Gould was coming up to visit Sam. So he introduced me, and that's how I got to know Gould. And, from there I went down to New York. I was supposed to take one lesson with Gould that turned into 3 during those 2 weeks, completely hit it off with him. And that's the reason I wanted to go to New York, eventually went to New York to study with Gould, and kind of pretty much how I found myself, where I found myself for the last 33 years here in Cleveland and everything since. And, so I owe Sam everything, man. I mean, that was one of those huge forks in the road where it's like, bang, I went that direction and never looked back. And it was really Sam was kind of that lightning rod. And then ever since then, anytime I saw Sam, either with Empire or later when I saw him with Gould and we did some projects together, I got to play with him and I got to know him much more personally rather than in a teacher-student sort of a manner, which was enlightening unto itself. But still, just, hanging with him and Gould over the years and just being a small part of Sam's life and him a small part of mine, he had an enormous positive impact on me. And I can't say enough how much his encouragement at that particular time in that particular way did everything for me.
Was that he was a mentor to all 3 of us, clearly, and you hit on a thing that I often forget that was so important about him, which was the connector thing. Is what you're talking about, like, oh, who you need to know is blank, and I don't know how he knew as many people as he did. I don't know how you maintain that kind of database in your head, but he'd meet you and suss you out and go, I know exactly who you need to go be with. Really cool.
Yeah. He was great at identifying people's skills and what they could do. Not only what they did do, but what they could do and how they could apply it. And he was always encouraging people in to go into different genres and to explore different parts of their musicality. I mean, he was such a not a 3-dimensional guy, he was like an 18-dimensional guy. I mean, he played so many different things so well. And the breadth of his knowledge base of just music, but also life and just different things. I mean, from his dad, who did all that he did as a lawyer in Miami and all the things that he was surrounded by as a kid, I'm sure that had a big influence on him to have a very wide lens on a lot of things.
So you said you might have gone into business. What would that have looked like? Did you have a sense? Was it like a either or thing, or you just were kind of still kicking around ideas?
Well, I mean, the whole thing, within my family, my dad ran an ad agency, and my mom worked with him. But my dad's whole thing was business. Neither of my parents were musicians, although my mom played piano when she was a kid and carried that into adulthood and kind of had her repertoire of some Chopin and Brahms and Beethoven and Mozart that she would play kind of randomly. And she was quite good and got around it. My dad couldn't have cared less about music. It was like not on his radar whatsoever. So from his standpoint, he wanted me to go get either an MBA or a law degree, go into communications, eventually swing around and take over his business for him. That was his plan.
So how'd that go? Then when that conversation,
that was, he, how do I say this? Nicely, at least. I mean, my dad was a very strong personality. I mean, my dad was very much this kind of master of ceremonies. Like, there's the planets, and then there's like a supernova sun, and the supernova sun kind of star. I mean, that was my dad walking into a room. I mean, he left the room, everybody felt like he was their best friend. And that's the kind of dude he was. But he was a very strong personality, and he thought making a living at music was not that noble of a thing, and that he's worried about how you going to make money. And my mom's whole thing was just do what makes you happy. I mean, for instance, we lived in an apartment building until I was 9 years old. And I used to drag my mom every Tuesday, whatever garbage day was when I was little, especially when I was like 4 or 5 years old, because I love watching the garbage men like pick up the garbage and hang on the truck and throw around cans and drive in this giant vehicle. I wanted to be a garbage man. In kindergarten, when they asked me, "What do you want to do for a living? What do you want to be?" It's like, I want to be a garbage man. And my mom, to her credit, she would take me out back to the garbage, and she told me later, she's like, yeah, these garbage men probably thought that I was like hitting on him or something, like they wanted, like I was into him or something. 'Cause they always saw me out there with you, and they didn't, they thought, yeah, he's bringing her son, right? She was really like,
it's a prop,
looking for something, like somebody bringing a dog, like a single guy bringing a dog to the dog.
Can I borrow your kid? I want to go hit on the garbage men.
I want to hit on the garbage men. No, she always laughed about it, but. No, but her whole thing was just like, you got to do what makes you happy. You got to do what you enjoy, and ultimately you will be successful if you do what you enjoy. Yeah. Because success will not be measured by dollars or accolades. It'll be measured by your satisfaction. And that's where she was always coming from. So she was like, look, you want to study music, look, why don't you do this? You want to go to UCLA, it's always been your dream school. Go to UCLA, study whatever you want, but study music on the side. By then I was taking lessons with Tony Plogue, who's fantastic, who was a giant influence on me as well. And, take lessons with Tony, play in all the groups, do all the playing, but study some other things, get a broad education. And as you get older toward, grad school, then you can make more of a decision by the time you're 20, 21, which, thinking about it as a musician, is insane, because that's like telling somebody who wants to be a football player or baseball player, just like hang out, lift some weights, play some pickup games. When you're 20, 21, we'll see if the NFL or MLB is still there. I mean, as a musician, you've got to be focused on it, you got to be training. But the way it worked out for me was that, for me, the way I was wired, it was actually fortuitous. Had I gone to a conservatory, had I gone to study with Gould in New York at 17, 18, I'd have been toast. I would have never made it. I wasn't mature enough. I would have gone the wrong directions. It would have not worked out well the way I was wired. And doing it the way I did, where I kind of flew under the radar, I was taking lessons, I was doing all the playing and more than any music major was doing. I mean, as I went through it, I played Nebraska Quintet, I played in the UCLA marching band for a year, I played in the wind ensemble, I was in the 2 orchestras in LA that were the orchestras that all the top students out of SC and Cal Arts and Northridge and all the top music students and graduates were all playing in those 2 orchestras. So I was playing with a lot of guys and getting a lot of that sort of input and that sort of inspiration. And then, about the time when I went to the Empire Brass thing, was that was really my first summer festival that I went to after my sophomore year, where for 4 weeks, all I did was play the trumpet. And then to have Sam working with me, and then meeting Gould and then taking lessons with Gould when I went to New York, was just this revelatory kind of light bulb moment for me. And then the next summer I went to Aspen and then spent 9 weeks doing that. And that was when I was just like, all right, that's it. I got to give this a shot. If nothing else, I'll give it a shot. And if it doesn't work out, I got this history degree to go back on. I'll go back, get an MBA and go do something.
Let's go back just to for one more little detail I'm kind of curious about. You say you're studying with Ploeg in high school?
I started studying with him halfway through my 12th grade year.
Okay. So you obviously didn't suck, because you're not just going to go like study with him. So you clearly showed an affinity for the instrument. You were clearly,
yeah.
So when did that catch fire for you?
Well, I mean, I actually started when I was 6.5. I mean, I wanted to start when I was 4, actually.
But the garbage thing.
Yeah, the garbage thing. I also didn't have any front teeth. That was kind of a hindrance. My mom actually brought me down to the music store when I was 4, and they took one look at me and was like, "Bring him back when his front teeth come in." I was like, all right. And then my first teacher was Ziggy Elman, his big band guy. Played with Tommy Dorsey and Benny Goodman and everybody back then. And he's the one who started me. And no, I always loved playing music, and music was huge in the schools in Santa Monica where I grew up. So I played everything. I mean, throughout elementary school, junior high, high school, I played everything from marching band to jazz band to wind ensemble to orchestra to playing in a rock band with a bunch of guys in high school to, everything in between. So I played everything, and I had some, I had a good amount of success, and gotten some of the all-state orchestra or all-state wind ensemble and some honor orchestras and stuff like that. But so I knew I had some stuff going on, and I started studying with Tony, and that was a real revelation for me, and I felt like that was a big uptick in my playing toward the end of high school. And then luckily I stayed with Tony all through college, and then about halfway through college that turned into Tony, and then also James Stamp also had a big effect on me. So I kind of stumbled into this is the best way for me to put it. I happened to be in these places at a particular time, met particular people who, for whatever interest, for whatever, took interest in me.
So you're on the other side of that equation now, and you bump into students, or students bump into you, who are at that point where they're saying, well, Dad wants me to go to business school, and I feel like I could make a run at this, but I'm not 100% sure. What's that? How does that conversation go from this side of the desk?
Interesting question. I mean, I probe a lot about where somebody's at as far as what do they want to do? What do they really want to do? Do they really love the trumpet? Do they really care that much for it? Or is it somebody else making that decision for them? And I kind of probe that whether somebody's going to conservatory or is on the fence or wants to go to, a bigger, larger university, state university or something. And, if you're going to do this, you have to love what you do. It can't be that kind of drudgery. I know some musicians who've been very successful, who it was chosen for them. They were set on that path. They feel like they're kind of obligated to do it, but there's kind of a sadness and something missing for them. And there's kind of a longing to do other things. And some of them do find other outlets to be able to do more of what they want to do. But I don't know, when I see young kids, and I know how intense it is. I know how much you've got to work. And if you want to work that hard and put in that much time that intensively, you've got to enjoy it. You've got to love it. You've got to feel like, there's a passion for it and an energy you want to put into it, and a desire, a really intense desire to make that happen. And even then, it's like somebody coming to me, and it was a really terrific baseball player throughout elementary school, junior high, high school, wanting to go to college, wants to play ball, wants to go into professional baseball. I mean, or somebody says, yeah, I want to go into acting. I mean, you can't say no, because you never know. I mean, all of a sudden you could be just hanging out, and then bam, you take off. Other people, the trajectory is very quick and then they level off and kind of peter out. I've seen that. Some other people, more often, it's like this.
Yeah.
And, hopefully the trajectory is like that. But so you never know. You don't want to discourage somebody. But at the same time, if I find somebody is saying, well, I really don't know, they're a little ambivalent about it or they're hesitant about it, then I'll say, look, there are some incredible school. There's some, Northwestern is a great school. I say that selfishly because I teach there, but also even if I didn't, you look at the history of that with Barbara and Charlie and Mr. Chickowitz before that.
And I went there.
And you went there, yeah. So, well,
despite that.
No, but you've got Northwestern, you've got IU, which is a tremendous school. You've got University of Michigan, you've got USC, you've got Rice. There's University of Maryland with Gecker for trumpet. There's a ton of ASU, Arizona State. There are tons of great schools that you can get a 4-year degree that you can do a double major, or you can still take the lessons and do all the playing and take other classes. And there's a lot of ways to explore it. And it's just, for me, that happened to resonate the right way. So I guess that, going back to your question, Lance, is that I try to guide somebody by telling them there's no correct way to do it. There's only the way that's correct for you.
Amen.
And, you got to find your own way. I flew under the radar, and that was the best thing for me, and not to have that pressure when I was 17, 18, and to, kind of deal with it a little bit later the way I did. And that's why I think I was successful, was I was able to kind of have that gestation period to be able to kind of find my way organically. I know that sounds very cliche, but to be able to find my way the way I did, it just kind of happened.
That makes sense.
I'm hearing two things. I'm hearing that you were curious and that you kept being curious over and over again, and that you were blessed with teachers who let you find who you are and what path you were taking and the pace that you were going to take that path. Mm-hmm. And if sometimes the most heartbreaking is when you've got a student who's curious, who encounters teachers who don't let them follow their own path or figure it out or go at their own pace or whatever. But then also if you have, great teachers, the same teachers you do, with a student who's not curious, then that also pretty much never works out. You need both of those things, and you had them both.
No, I was extraordinarily lucky. And at every turn, I thank, any and all of these people and others, very, very happily so.
Yeah.
There's not a day that goes by that I don't feel that I owe these people that respect and that appreciation.
Yeah. And how immersive was the Empire Brass Seminar? Wasn't it crazy to just be like hanging out with that caliber of players, teachers, is like be at Tanglewood and the Boston Symphony? It's like an immersion class, it's like music immersion that happens to be on brass. Like, what a crazy thing to experience.
The whole thing. And then there's also the TMC program with the, the students. And,
mm-hmm.
At that point, oh God, I'm trying to think who was there. I know Tom Smith was one of the guys who plays in New York now.
Mm-hmm.
I want to say that was Tim Morrison around a little bit, some of that as well. Anyhow, some other guys like Bill Caballero was out there as one of the students. Dave Kirk was the tuba player.
Yeah,
first time I heard Kirk playing the Boma Sextet.
Yeah,
hearing that kind of tuba playing was eye-opening. Like, here's this young guy who's 21 or 22 at the time. Killing it.
Yep.
And then of course the BSO guys, hearing them, and that that summer was actually Rolf was still playing principal that summer.
Oh wow.
So I got to hear Rolf in the orchestra, and
crazy.
Andre Combe was still there, and I took a couple lessons with him, which was really wonderful. And Charlie Duvall was in the section. Wow. Roger Blazan, of course, was around a lot. I spent a lot of time with Roger. Not as much that summer as I did a couple summers later when I got to be in the TMC group. But, Roger had a big influence on me. Gatala was around a little bit. And, I remember he sat in. I think they played a movement of the BAM Sextet with the Empire guys.
Mm.
I mean, again, it's all this revelatory, just you know, sounds around me, and it was a big eye opening experience. And then to experience it from my standpoint as a player, to have Sam coaching me, Mark Lawrence coached me, Charlie Lewis coached my group a little bit, who was couldn't have been nicer. You know, any of those guys were spectacular.
Wow. Yeah, I got to hear Sam Palafian and Chester Schmitz both perform like on the tuba multiple times a week, like over and over and over again. It's just like, yeah, ridiculous. And I was a curious kid, and yeah, you'd like to put those two things together, and yeah, it's like stuff happened. So speaking,
real quick, that's the
yeah.
whole thing. I mean, when you do the word curious,
Mm-hmm.
that curiosity to me is everything, and not just for the kids, but I mean, you look at Sam, you look at Gould, even, you know, in his own unique way.
Yes.
All these guys remain curious for the entirety of their life.
Yes.
I mean, Sam was always on a quest to find more information, to be better, to do more, to think about more, to explore more. And all the guys, you know, that I hung out with, you know, that are, you know, older guys, that curiosity is what drove them. And in many ways, I feel very much akin to that. I just, that kind of curiosity and quest for knowledge, to me, is at the heart of anyone who ultimately really finds whatever you deem success is.
Yeah, so well put. Yeah, Sam was learning until the day he died. Yeah, the last visit that I had with Sam, when I flew down to see him, what I feared was one last time, which turns out it was, like a month before he passed away. Yeah, all he was doing was asking me questions. Like he was like, you know, and that seemed like what he wanted to do. So I just kind of, it was like he was interviewing me. You know, it's like we were. Yeah, he was like a second father to me, but he was just wanting to know all about the gigs I was playing and everything, and yeah, he's just soaking it all up. So yeah, what an energy. So turns out I miss him. But before I get sad, because that's not really where we need to take this, I wanted to tell everybody about Patrick Sheridan, who is another whack job from the desert who plays the tuba at an incredibly high level. He is doing a guide to the brass gym, which is actually happening here soon. It is happening June 14th to 18th. It's a 5-day thing that's happening live at noon Eastern every day, but it's also available. Each session will be available later that afternoon, and the whole thing will be online in the digital archives through September 1st. But I can't wait for this thing. Like, Monday is going to be a deep dive into both breathing gym and ear training. Tuesday is going to be a whole deep dive on flow exercises. Wednesday is going to be articulations and scales. Thursday is flexibilities. And Friday is the routine, like putting the whole thing together. And then there's going to be a bonus hangout and question and answer on Friday evening. So yeah, it's going to be really awesome. Pat is not just a dear friend, but he's one of the best teachers of anything I've ever met. Like, his brain is enormous, and he's very articulate, and he is able to put things in it's very actionable what he tells you to do. It's not, he doesn't just get you all riled up and then tell you to go figure it out. It's like he connects the dots. And if you're curious, check this thing out. And he's offering $50 discount for the time being. So go to patricksheridan.com and you can click on the banner at the top and go check that out. And both of the hosts of the Brass Junkies are going to be there that week. So yeah, Lance doesn't know that, but he's going to be there. So
sweet. What do I have to do? Who's this?
And I may have to join you guys. And
yeah, there you go. Yeah, it's going to be awesome.
Oh yeah,
yeah, it's going to.
That's fantastic.
He's been a great teacher his entire. I mean, I've known him for. Lance has known him for longer. I've known him for coming up on 25 years now. He was a great teacher then, but Lance will agree. He's like taken things to another level. Like, within the last 5 to 10 years, he's just like. He's bumped it up like massively. It's kind of scary, actually, how organized he is, because I know he's just usually like, you know, in any social situation he's firing in all directions, But man, is he organized. Yeah, he's a gifted teacher. There are times I always need to hear what he's teaching, but I'm also at a point in my career where I will stop and just analyze how he's teaching it, how he's delivering the information. Like, I mean, because it's a masterclass on teaching as well as on the actual, stuff that he's, the information. So I'm looking forward to it. I'm going to be judging him the whole time. So yeah, it'll be fun.
He's aight.
Lance, we should figure out how to use Twitch. We should have a live Twitch stream while he's doing it to comment on right.
That's funny.
I think that groan says it all, man. That's perfect.
The curiosity thing. Let's go back. I'm going to try to right the ship. So Pat's another guy who's curious about, it's about, I don't know if you know Tim Ferriss. He wrote the 4 Hour Work Week. He's written a bunch of New York Times best-selling books, but there's a similar DNA, which is it's about breaking down excellence and figuring out what is it that what is not formula. It makes it diminishes it too much, but Pat has become a fantastic photographer and an excellent chef, and so like Sam, these people that are the most interesting to me, and you're definitely on the list, Michael, are people who are curious and they're lifelong learners, and it is that you don't know what you might learn from this Uber driver that you can then use in some piece of music, some way you phrase a thing, just a couple of words that somebody says, that if you don't engage and you're not curious about who's this human who's getting me from point A to point B, you may miss a spectacular opportunity.
Yeah, I mean, that's, it's interesting because as you're speaking, I can't help but think of my dad, because my dad was very much that guy. My dad, everywhere he went, he's talked with everybody. Wherever he was connecting, he was looking, he was asking, he was listening. But he always said, you got to be an eternal student. Mm-hmm. That was his mantra, just to be an eternal student, that he was always learning. And even when he was, he lived to be 85. And even when he was in his 80s, he would comment to me that he had a stroke and he had to live with the aftermath of the stroke for 18 years. And he'd walk by the mirror and he'd comment, he's like, who's this old guy in the mirror? Because in his mind, he was about 40. And he always thought, he was always very young thinking, and he was always very vibrant that way. And it really, I think that perspective really propelled him. And in a lot of ways, like a guy like Sam, a guy like Gould, a lot of the guys I've been around with in the Cleveland Orchestra who were older than me, some of the Zell guys I first came in with, were a lot of that kind of energy of curiosity and desire and motivation and intellect and talent and kind of the intersection of all these things. And then they were always looking for energy and inspiration, not only at work or not only playing the instrument, they were looking at it just in life and in different ventures, and how they can bring those experiences and those colors and emotions and characters and feelings all into their music and channel and into the different pieces as would be appropriate for them to do.
So for you, I mean, we've alluded to the ham radios, and this can be an entry to that. Doesn't have to be. What are the things that you're kind of curious about? I'm into magic and stand-up comedy. Like, I'm always just like, I've always got the sensors open to those two things. What's on your list? What are you curious about?
Oh, man. I mean, I'm going to sound like a trumpet geek, but I mean, during this whole COVID period, I'm actually, I finished 4 books, and I'm actually about most of the way through a 5th book that I'm working on. And a lot of that had to do with some historical deep dives. At first, it started out as kind of a roots journey, looking at Stamp and Stamp's idea with Schlossberg. Okay, where did Schlossberg come from? Who did he get who were his influences? And then who were their influences? Who were their influences? Kind of going back, and I found myself kind of hanging out in kind of, Germany, Eastern Europe, Belarus, Latvia, Lithuania, Poland area, what is now those countries, which is where my family is from. My family's from Belarus and Lithuania, or my mom and dad's side, respectively. And that's where Schlossberg is from. So it was this kind of roots journey, and then going through it just kind of led me through some family genealogy, led me into some trumpet genealogy, led me to all this material that I didn't know about, and different resources and places, and it just that kind of detective work for me is really my playtime.
What were some of the big surprises that you fell into?
That's a hard thing to say. I guess the biggest surprise was how much stuff is there that hasn't seen the light of day in a while. Or stuff that hasn't really been combed over and researched and really get down to brass tacks, like really creating an urtext version of. Going back to manuscripts, going back to old versions of things. Recently I actually picked up an old low E flat F trumpet, an old Heckel trumpet from the 1890s. Just with the idea that if I'm going to be going back and doing that kind of music, I want to have an instrument that's akin to what they were using.
Right.
And, I've tried not to pepper my house with too many old horns, but I mean, I've ended up, accumulating some old horns, and, it goes into the history thing. And then I start doing a deep dive on, keyed trumpets or slide trumpets, or, different aspects of the history of the trumpet, and different trumpet players and different methods that they used, and different musicality and different manuscripts, and seeing how these guys work things, and how they studied things, and why things evolved the way they did. So for me, that's real interesting. And then, aside from classical music, I love classic rock. So, I'm always reading about, Eddie Van Halen passed away, last fall, which was devastating for me. I growing up with Van Halen and growing up with them in LA, and I'm a big guitar guy. So I love, Eddie Van Halen and Stevie Ray Vaughan and Hendrix and Clapton and, any number of different guys. And, just kind of doing a deep dive on Eddie Van Halen, because I happen, one of the guys who was one of his guitar techs is a guy whose mom was my babysitter when I was born. And it's a long story, but kind of convoluted, but a very good friend of the family, is like a, younger brother almost. And so I had some connection with that. And, just hearing these stories about him, and just reading about, I don't know, you've got time on your hands, and listening to old recordings and listening to stuff that hadn't been out there before, and just kind of also kind of gleaning. It's like, what was he doing? What kind of energy was thrown in? What can I use from that? There's all sorts of things you can use from that.
Yes.
Just the creativity of it was genius. So there's that part of just kind of music, and then just history in and of itself. Obviously, without getting political, because I won't, the last year and a half has been very interesting. I'll just leave it at that. It has been extraordinarily diversely interesting.
What do you mean, Michael?
From a wide number of perspectives. And, so I've done a lot of reading about history of various things, and the relationship between other points in history and what we're living through now, or other various things. So that's been a real interest for me, is just kind of deep diving into that world. I'm a big sports junkie, and I happen to love sports memorabilia, especially Brooklyn Dodger stuff. So that's part of what I mess around with a little bit on the side. I love photography. My mom was a great photographer. She had this Rolleiflex camera, one of those box cameras that you kind of look down and you see everything upside down, and you fiddle around with the lens and put it in focus. And she was a great photographer, so I've gotten into a lot of photography and different things with that. and just kind of researching photography, different photographers, and different things that are out there. I haven't purchased anything recently, at least. But so there's that, and then there's all the ham radio stuff. I've been a ham radio operator since I was a kid, and in many ways, ham radio and Morse code is all about rhythm. So what I realized when I first got in the orchestra here, there was a second trombone player named Al Kofsky. And Kofsky was one of the great valve players ever, had the greatest euphonium sound. I mean, it's beautiful, rich euphonium sound. But Kofsky was a radio operator on a minesweeper during World War II in the Pacific. And he's told me, he said, yeah, they made a lot of the musicians radio operators because they were really good with rhythm. And you start hearing in rhythm, you start hearing not just the letters, you start hearing words, you start hearing phrases. And it's very easy to pick up for musicians. So it didn't surprise me that I was kind of drawn to ham radio. It just happened that one of my best childhood friends, much older brother, who was like 14 years older, was a total electronics geek and was a ham radio operator. So I grew up watching this dude's older brother do this from a very early age. And then we both got licenses. And he went kind of into electronics, and I, went into music, but I still, mess around. And this is all old tube equipment. It's actually, you could tell your dad I have Collins equipment.
Okay.
If you really want to get into it, tell your dad my main station is a Collins KWM2A transceiver with a I can't even think here. What the heck is this? It's a 312B5 VFO, a 30L1 linear, and an R7 vertical for 10 through 40 meters.
Yeah, my dad, his call letters were W1DA, Whiskey 1 Delta Alpha.
Oh, so he's an extra. Nice.
Yeah, and he at one point in time he had contacted someone in every single country where it was legal, like in the entire world. That was like the late 80s. We had my parents still live in the same place. The towers are down, but live on just over an acre, and up on the hill behind our house that he had 2 90-foot and 100-foot towers up there.
He was serious business.
He was serious business, yeah. Wow. And it was like, and he could, talking the Morse code thing, you're right, it was like music. He could do that so fast, it was unbelievable. Like it was just, and he could also, obviously decipher it at the speed of life as well. The only thing I can spell in Morse code is da da dit da da dit da da dit. Oh, I messed it up. Da da dit da da dit da dit da da did it da 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 did it. That's my name. It's Andrew Hitz. So I think I screwed up Andrew. That was the one. But yeah, it was. Well, I knew when I would run down the stairs to go and talk to him, he was always up for me talking. But every once in a while, when I would get to the bottom of the stairs, I would see his hand just go like that, like behind him, and that meant that he was like had some barely connected to some dude who was like hanging off a cliff on Easter Island or something. Like, and I would just like.
He was chasing DX. DX is like.
Yes.
Like far,
yes.
foreign countries and far away.
Exactly. So I would just tiptoe upstairs.
Dude on like Diego Garcia Island in the middle of the Indian Ocean or something.
That is exactly correct.
That's probably with a pileup of like a couple of hundred guys, and like you got to just like thread the needle of like where to come in and when to do it, and but it's also, I'm sure, the way he was with Morse code. I mean, it sounds like a blur. It's that.
Yes.
fast.
Yep. It did.
I was never that fast. I actually just have a straight key. I never, used a bug or a keyer. But I mean, your dad sounds like he was serious business. But if you tell him, Collins, KWM2A transceiver, 312B5 VFO, 30L1 linear, and I also, tell him this also. I've got a 75A4 receiver with all the filters that I also use as a separate receiver sometimes with the transceiver.
Cool. I'm actually just going to play him this. So he just turned 80 last week. And
he'll know what all this stuff is, because this is all the 75A4 here is from, I think, about 1957, 58. And then the stuff up here on the top, the transceiver, the VFO, and the linear are all round emblems, so they're from like mid-70s.
I used to
It's
call
all tube equipment. It's all tube equipment.
I used to call his shack downstairs. I used to call it Radio Shack because with the lights out, there was just like all these red lights blinking.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it looked like NASA. Like
Oh,
it
yeah.
looked like Houston.
Oh, I'm sure he had some. I'm sure he had some little tube equipment, and then maybe he got into some, Kenwood or ICOM or some Yaesu, some of the stuff
I
that
think he did.
more digital toward
Yeah.
the 80s. I was always an old fashioned tube guy. I don't know, it just spoke to me. Maybe it's the historian in me. Maybe it's just like the glow of the tube and the warmth and just the vibe. But it's also in a weird way. I know this sounds wacky, but the Collins stuff is known for their sound. It's known for the audio. And I get a lot of compliments whenever I'm on the air that my audio, whenever I say I've got Collins gear, they're like, oh, okay, yeah, that makes sense. So in some ways it's kind of like, an instrumentalist, like for me, it's like having a great Bach trumpet.
Right.
It's that kind of a voice. And it's also, hearing it. I mean, just the sound it made and just the way you can discern things and just the warmth of the sound as well. And also the selectivity and sensitivity of these receivers also was terrific.
Speaking of sensitivity.
So I would like to speak with you for a few moments about the Mary Papert School of Music at Duquesne University in beautiful and sunny Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, which is one of those things. So if you click on the link in the show notes, you'll be taken to a page where you can find out all the ways you can be involved with the brass area at Duquesne University and the Mary Papert School. They're a long-time sponsor of the show, and we couldn't be happier. And very, very special thanks to Jim Dork Nova for making that possible.
Well, if you want Nova, it's da 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 da.
Don't forget the dork.
There's
But
Nova.
yes, that's true. Okay,
And Jim,
so
da 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 da. There's Nova Jim.
perfect.
There you go. What's dork?
Da 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 da.
That sound.
That's-
So
I
I
gotta
got a
learn
funny
that one.
story. So
That's Nova.
so Kofsky, Al Kofsky, who I mentioned, every now and then, if a rehearsal got slower, conductor was doing something that he thought was kind of stupid, and he didn't like it. He had this way of doing this, like I can't do it, but it almost sounded like kind of a recorder sound. He put his hands like it, and he sent Morse code to me, and he said, and you could play this for your dad. Dit 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 da. Right? Play that for your dad. He'll laugh. unless he doesn't like profanity, and then he's going to get pissed off.
Oh
Is it
no,
that,
he's
that kind of
he's fine with profanity.
that whistling sound. That
Yeah,
thing.
yeah.
Yeah.
So we're doing this Coriolano piece. I forget what it is, but there was this one cadenza where literally you're supposed to take the note that you have on your page and play any random rhythm on it that
Cool.
you want. So this buddy of mine, whose older brother was kind of our they call it an Elmer, somebody who's like kind of the person who's like your mentor in ham radio. Like Sam is your Elmer, right?
Okay.
So my buddy Jack, whose brother was our Elmer, I knew he'd listen to our broadcasts. So I've got this one thing on this one note.
You Morse coded him?
So I'm Morse coding him. I'm going da 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 da. I'm saying over and over again, I'm saying F you Jack, F you Jack, F you Jack in Morse code. So the concert ends, and Kofsky is like hyperventilating. He's laughing. And during the bows, he actually turns to me. He goes, "Who's Jack?"
I'm writing for the show notes.
He loved that, man.
I'm writing for the show notes the time Sachs cursed out a friend over a radio broadcast via Morse code.
Yep, yeah. Because my note was like on a high concert C. So I mean, it's just and I
Coming
could
through.
just torque it. So I'm just there's like an A or B flat. It's like some high note, so I could just torque it. It was I don't know. Bukowski at the end and during the bows leaning over, it's like, who's Jack?
Everybody else is going, huh?
And everybody, who, what?
So what's happening with the orchestra right now? You guys are you what are you doing?
Well, right this second, nothing. But we did a number of things between October and the beginning of May, kind of intermittently, but only people who wear masks and at 6 foot distance. So it was only strings, keyboard, harp, percussion. So our winds and brass, I haven't played a note in the orchestra since March 13 of 20. But at Blossom, our summer home, we start right back up the first week of July. My first rehearsal is July 2nd. Full orchestra. Not sure if it's going to be full audience. Not sure about the distancing. I know for the fall, they're already talking about full audience, no distancing on stage. I'm not sure if it's official now or not, but basically if you're vaccinated, you don't have to wear a mask. If you're not vaccinated, you need to wear a mask at work, on stage and in Severance Hall or at Blossom. But other than that, it sounds like business as usual. But I'll tell you, a week ago, just last week, for the first time, the 4 of us in the trumpet section, I got 2 hours of stage time, and we sat out there and played these Mancini quartets, which I don't know if you guys know these things. They're these trumpet quartets that are all based on, some are like William Byrd motet or some Bach or Midsummer Night's Dream Mendelssohn or Heldenleben so it's like orchestra excerpts mixed with some Bach chorales mixed with some other stuff. And it was the first time we gotten together in person. We'd had Zoom meetings like every few weeks, every month or so. We'd get on Zoom together and kibitz and catch up and stay kind of connected. But to actually be on stage physically, because we've all been vaccinated long over a month ago, to be on stage together and play and actually hear resultant tones and feel each other's body language. I mean, it was so great and it sounded so good. I don't know whether it did or not, but it felt like it was nirvana.
Wow.
Just to do that again. And so that was kind of a little bit of a toe in the water to kind of get our sea legs and get back in the game a little bit. But I'm excited to get back to work. I've missed seeing them. I've missed playing in the orchestra. I'm not going to lie to you. I've enjoyed my autonomy and I've enjoyed this time and I've gotten to dive into a lot of stuff, whether it's, instrument design and R&D with Bach or the book projects or research or just getting to hang out with my wife, who we're kind of ships in the night between her work and, as a harp soloist and, she's traveling a lot. And then when she's home, I'm traveling. So we were doing a lot of this, quite often. And, to get to basically have dinner with her every single night for the last 15 months has been phenomenal. Mm-hmm. I mean, we also realized that, after almost 28 years, thank God that, we realized that if we were stuck on a desert island, we wouldn't kill each other. We still, she still puts up with my BS and, I adore her. It's just, she's, really wonderful that way. So, that was a nice part of this whole COVID thing and not playing in the orchestra was I got to spend that kind of time with my wife and a little bit with my daughter as well before she went to college. Mm-hmm. So, there's a silver lining to it, but getting back in the orchestra and getting back playing is going to be really, really wonderful to be in that energy and be in that sound again. That's really what I miss.
I saw, it might have been a week ago tonight. I can't remember. 7-8 days ago, I'm walking down the street and Pete Sullivan's principal trombone of the Pittsburgh Symphony. He lives around the corner, and Zach Smith's in the horn section. He lives up the street. So they're just like, we just all happened to be out with our dogs. And Pete had played a quartet gig that day, a low brass thing. Nova, and I can't remember who else was on the gig, maybe Craig, but it was that same, there was just like this, like, we got to, you could just see him like reliving the experience of getting to play with his colleagues again at a high level. And it was like a fundraiser thing for a bunch of donors. And it was, they were happy. But just the fact that they got to sit shoulder to shoulder and make music again was just like it was a certain kind of spring in his step.
Again, just to be surrounded by that sound. And by the way, Pete, I've known Pete. We were at Aspen together in '82 when we were 20, and he's now been teaching at CIM this past year and a half, 2 years, and it's bummed me because I know he's come up periodically to see these guys, and for Pete to be here in Cleveland, for me not to get to see him, bums me. But soon enough. But still, man, just to be in that sound. I mean, that's the thing I have to say. Whenever I'm in the orchestra, and especially now that I've got much less time and fewer years ahead of me than I do behind me in the orchestra. Hopefully, I've got a number of years left, but less than I do behind me. And I really appreciate just being in the midst of that sound. And I'm very fortunate to be in the midst of an incredible sound in a really incredible hall. And it's just, I guess it's, when I hear, professional athletes talk about, what they miss, they miss the locker room and they miss the travel a little, but mostly it's like the camaraderie of the travel, and they miss the game. They miss the game day. And that's the thing I've missed the most during this whole COVID period is the game day. It's like getting up for a show, getting dressed, walking on stage, being amongst my colleagues and just really charging ahead together and being kind of in the midst of that sound and that energy. And, that's something I really, really look forward to getting back in the middle of.
Wow.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that's great. Hey, Lance, why don't you tell the people about Houchin Horns?
Oh, you know what? That reminds me. I've been meaning to tell you. Houchin Horns aims to spread the joy of music through providing the highest level of products, services, and resources to the brass playing community. Michael gets choked up when I start talking about this. It reminds me as well that Houchin Horns is a premier brass pro shop with an impressive lineup of the best instruments, accessories, sheet music, and more.
Do they sell toasters?
Not sure about that, but you know what? They do have the unique Varus brand of products, especially designed by the craftsmen and pro musicians of Houchin Horns. They do repairs and customizations in-house. You can browse vintage and consignment instruments at HouchinHorns.com. And if you enter the promo code Junkies11 at online checkout, you will receive $500 off a purchase of a new instrument from Houchin Horns. Very special thanks to Mark Houchin for making that possible. And we don't even make fun of Mark like we do of Dork Nova.
We had a meeting about it, and we thought, maybe we should make fun of Mark as well, but we decided to put all of those creative energies just towards making better fun of Jim Nova. So that seemed and Parker, yes. The last thing before we get to the bonus episode, which we got a few things that I want to talk to you about, including a little bit more about Eddie Van Halen. I was fortunate enough to host Michael Sachs here for a really awesome Inside the Practice Room through Hitz Academy, where we did an hour-long deep dive into your practicing and how you structure it, how long, how many sessions, like how you approach it, the tools you used. I learned a ton from that session. I wanted to thank you for being so generous.
My pleasure, man. Thank you. I'm thrilled that, one thing I said sticks.
No, it was it was great. I love it. And my favorite thing about this, I've now done 4 or 5 of them, have about the same amount that are scheduled, but that so far you and Jeff Nelson and Canadian Brass and DeMondre Thurman and Patrick Sheridan, like all of you have very different approaches. I mean, there's a lot of commonality, but then the actual tactics, which is of course what I would guess, but it's really cool to hear how all of you have basically stumbled through being curious and through just like paying attention to what's working and what's not. You've all stumbled on your own rhythm. I won't get the quote exact, but one of the things that you said, I'll paraphrase, is you might be surprised by how little I practice, right? Where it's more like a couple of hours a day. It's not 4 hours a day. And I really liked you hearing that. And just you didn't talk a lot about being efficient. I mean, you didn't like call it what, but that's exactly what it was, right? It's just that your I loved how you're so focused, and that you have a plan, and that you execute that plan, and then once you get done what you get done, you get the hell out of there, which yeah, I really, I loved your approach. So thank you for spending the time to join me for that.
My pleasure. I mean, one of my main mantras, and I didn't say this in that discussion, but one of my main things with practicing is do no harm. Build up, don't break down, do no harm. So
Yes.
It's always got to be quality of practice time over quantity. And in that sense, doing no harm, making sure that I'm always ingraining it right, that I'm always focused in the right way, that I'm always evolving things forward, that I've always got some sort of a downrange goal for things. I'm never just doing anything haphazard. There's a purpose and there's a reason, and there's a very specific goal that I have in mind with what I want to get done.
Yeah, that's wonderful. If you want to check out that session with Michael, you can go to hitzacademy.com, and you can there was a discount code before the thing, but I'm going to set up another one for anybody that wants to check it out. The discount code, I'm deciding right now and leaving a note, is going to be Ham Radio. All one word, Ham Radio, and you can get that for just $19. And if you purchase that, it'll be available for long-term viewing. You can watch as many times as you want. Yeah, I've already rewatched it. It's good stuff. So we're gonna have him stick around for the bonus episode, which is available to any of our Patreon patrons, which we've at this point got over 100, which is pretty cool. Yeah, which is really great. Turns out if you just keep doing the thing for now, we've probably if we if we offered a Patreon for there'd probably be 800 people who would pay money if we would just stop, but we've got over 100 that are actually pay us to keep going, and that's the number that we choose to focus on around here. So although if we really want to monetize this thing, Lance, what do you think?
What would it cost to get us to stop?
To stop? If we got $1,000 per episode, I mean, I'd stop. That'd be fine. So there. Although we got to be careful, there might be one rich person who hates us who might just be "Here's
catch-22, man. This is we're getting into."
I will set up a recurring payment directly from my checking account if you two just stop. But anyway, for the time being, we're not going to. You can head to Patreon.
Don't. I'll pay you.
That was one of the most popular lines in Boston Brass. You know that thing you do? Yeah, don't. You can head to patreon.com/thebrassjunkies to become a Patreon patron and hear the bonus episode. You can imagine the bonus episodes with, say, Mark Gould are pretty. Yeah, there's some juicy stuff in there. Sam Palafian, Jim Pandolfi. I shared a great story with Jim Pandolfi where he cursed me out on a voicemail, which I actually played the voicemail, which is
Dolph is beautiful, man. I love Dolph so much.
They broke the mold on that dude.
Real quick, when he was living on Columbus Ave. Between
69th and 70th.
69 and 70.
Uh-huh.
This is 68 and 69.
Yeah. Oh, no, I think you're right. Yes. Anyway.
With the block up from the Empire Szechuan.
Mm-hmm.
But man, he'd be practicing, and you'd hear him, you yell up, and you'd play stuff out the window.
Yeah.
But when I would come into the city, a lot of times I'd always make sure I had a night off, and then there would be a hang at Dolph's.
Uh-huh.
And it was all the guys in the Met and Dolph and Gould and all these, everybody would show up. It would start at 5 or 6 in the afternoon, and with somebody cooking, and there were other things going on, and then a couple guys at 7:45 be like, oh man, we got to get down to we got to go. And they'd go in to play some Mozart opera, play the overture, a couple of arias, and then they'd have an hour and a half off. They'd leave the pit and come back to Dolph's.
Yep. And then yes.
Hang on, there's all right, got to go back. And but it was Gould and Dolph, and it was like a Vegas act.
Yes, it was.
And in Dolph's place, so of course, Dolph, this terrible, degenerative eye issue. and his son was a really good golfer, so he had this
Yeah,
net.
Bobby.
He had his net up against the wall, so his son can hit golf balls.
And
But
there was holes in the
net,
ceiling.
there are also these little holes in the ceiling, because what would happen is, instead of grabbing a 6-iron golf, because of his eyesight, he'd grab like a 60 degree and he'd just start popping balls up into the ceiling. So there's all these golf ball sized holes in the ceiling. But that was, and at some point, I don't know, later in the evening, they would, send me and another guy would go out to like go get food and more booze or something, or, whatever. They'd send us on a run to get things. And it went until like 4 a.m. Until guys looked like they were going to drop dead. Gould and Pandolfi were still going.
In Pandolfi's last like 3 years, maybe in the Met, that's what Boston Brass would pass through New York quite a bit. I also passed through New York quite a bit. I dated a girl there for a while, and I was still in my prime. I was in my 20s at that. I was like in my late 20s, so I was always one of the last men standing. Yeah, those. I don't know how many times I hung out in that place, and it ended up shaving probably a good year off the end of my life. Totally worth it.
Well,
totally worth it.
A lot of that time, I didn't see more than 5 words the entire evening, but my face and my side hurt because I was laughing and smiling the whole time. I was just laughing so hard.
So many characters. Goodness.
It was so funny. There was one time, I forget what the tune was, but Gould had a big solo in something and it screwed it up on the broadcast and they had to redo it. But in order to redo it, they had to bring back like all these stagehands and all these supers and all these people. And I mean, it cost some ridiculous amount of money. And all these stagehands were thanking Gould later. Like they made like an extra like $2,500 because Gould had like screwed up the solo. So
he's a man of the people.
Pete Bond somehow got the recording of that like 30 seconds of whatever it was that he screwed up.
Of course he did.
So Pete Bond got it, and he got some junker trumpet from some pawn shop, and he rigged it up so that when you press down the second valve of this trumpet, it played this 30-second thing on a tape loop. And he gave it to Gould. That was going on. I mean, it was just.
That is a friend.
Epic.
There you have it. So if you want to hear Jim Pandolfi cursing me out on a voicemail, then become a Patreon patron, and you can do that. So Michael, this we knew it was going to be. This was wonderful. My face is starting to hurt now from smiling. So and the bonus episode, there's usually even more of that. So we're gonna wrap this. So thank you, Michael. Lance, I deeply want to thank you for your talents, your passions, for how prepared you came to the interview today, how much time you spent really, digging deep on Michael, and just for being the, really the rudder that keeps Pedal Note Media headed in the right direction.
Yeah, that's what I do.
And that is going to do it for another episode of The Brass Junkies. That was amazing. Man, I love talking to him. He's got so much energy. He's got so much passion. You know what I couldn't possibly care less about? About like keyed trumpets in the key of E flat and like the history of the pedigree, whatever. And I could listen to him talk about that for a few hours because he's so passionate about it. I can listen to anybody talk about anything that's that passionate about something. And I hope to be able to like unpack that with him. Cause again, that's nothing that that didn't inspire me to I'm going to Google some of that stuff. I just don't really care. But hearing him talk about it made me care because he's so into it. It's fascinating.
It'd be interesting to see. I mean, that who begat who begat who begat who in that trumpet lineage thing, and you look at in Euphonium Dork World, there's this Ponchielli piece, and it came up in 1870, whatever it was, and it's freaking hard. And so we think, we know Arbins and we know Clark, but here's this tune that's just so virtuosic, and certainly there were people that could play it, or they wouldn't have written it.
Right.
And so fascinating for him to have. I'm interested to know what he was able to find out.
Yeah. Yeah, me too. Me too. Hey, you remember when we interviewed Carol Jansch like almost 6 years ago, and I kept saying virtuostic?
Virtuostic, yes.
And it wasn't on purpose. And you and Carol, like, I was like, I don't know what that. Wait, they're both reacting. They're both reacting like, wait, what is it? Yeah, and then I was busted. Yeah, that was pretty funny. I still laugh about that. That was a long time ago. That was in 2015. That was a hot minute ago.
That was the first name that was going to be Chop Saver, was very virtuostic. It was going to be a thing, and then he decided, nah, nobody will get it. And then he went with Chop Saver.
Hitz will buy a bunch.
That's right. Send you a free case of it.
Yep, because he thinks it'll make him a virtuoso. What?
That's right.
Oh, and I also love hearing Sachs. That's why I started there. I love hearing him talk about Sam. Like, you can just tell that how much it's cool. He and well, all of us, like, there's a similar thing going on there where, like, he met Sam when he was young, and then the relationship like changed over time, from very clearly student mentor to to like still mentor, but then colleague. It's yeah, pretty neat.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and just to hear, well, it's a similar. I mean, it's basically the same thing, where it's just one, a generation back. So instead of going back to Herbert Clark and Arbens and back, it's Sam and Gould and Pandolfi, and then it's Michael, and then the people who have studied with him, and it's the way it's paying itself forward.
Yep.
Just these sort of glimpses in time to this, whatever this is that we're doing.
Well, the reason I was so interested in hearing him talk about that, like the COVID deep dives, and about how it was intertwined with like some of his family history and where they're from, is that it's generally called the great man theory, because sadly history usually when it's taught is just taught about the important men. So that's why it's called the great man theory, which is not exactly ideal. But like, that kind of history to me is really boring. It's just a list of like important in quotes, and there's a whole conversation of who decides what's important, etc. But like, important people who did important things and the dates they did them. And to me, it's all the stuff in the, it's like, how is
Context.
it's all how it's connected, because it's all humans. And it's like, and no one person just decided like, okay, this is what we're doing now. I mean, it's all about movements and stuff like that. And that's why it's cool to hear more recent history stuff, because I know that, I never saw Michael and Sam in the same room, but I know them both well. Like, I can totally picture how that relationship has morphed, and that's why I'm or did morph over time. And that's why I'm really happy that we've talked to him about it a couple of times, because it's just on the record and out there, just for people in the future to hear about Sammy from Miami, craft and lives.
The other thing that has been a recurring thing, probably just largely because of who we know and how this business goes, but the number of times that we've talked about the Empire Brass Seminar, and the number of people who went through that, and it's one of those times where there was a catalyst or just like fertile territory where all these amazing players and groups came out of this one very small geographic area in a relatively small period of time. And it's in our dorky, completely microcosm of a microcosm of a microcosm of a microcosm way, it's that same sort of thing that would happen in the Renaissance, or it would happen in Paris in the early 19th century, where there was just something in the water in some particular city for some period of time, where it was the right combination of things. And our little corner of the universe, I'm not pretending that it is as profound, But what happened with that seminar, changed brass careers.
Yeah.
Um,
I believe it's the Sam. I have still not been able to hear either the Sam episode or the bonus episode. I'm not sure if you have, like, since he passed away, I just haven't really been able to bring myself to listen to it yet. But I think it's the Sam episode where he talks specifically about Michael Sachs and, and about how he,
right.
I hope I'm not making that up, because maybe it was a conversation I had with Sam, but I think it was on the podcast where he talks about how Michael was just raw. It was exactly what Michael described, where he was, he was curious, he was in, but, and he'd studied with Ploeg, but he was, he was young and raw and wasn't yet, not in a bad way, just wasn't super focused on that one thing. And Sam talked about watching the flame, like, slowly get brighter and brighter and brighter inside of him. And then he's like, and then he became like Michael Sachs in all capital letters, but even the Michael Sachs of the world don't start that way. Right. There's like a process. I love talking to people like him to hear about that. And then also to be able to hear it from Sam's perspective and to watch it from above, if you
I think
will.
Gould talked about him too, if memory serves.
I wouldn't be
but
surprised.
I can't remember. I also thought it was interesting, the whole thing about, I feel like my commentary before the comment is that I feel like a lot of college music majors end up there because they were good at playing the whatever it was. And it just seemed like the logical thing to do. And everybody was like, wow, you're really good at playing the French horn. You should go study it in college. And because you're good at a thing, a lot of people think you should go do that thing. And he was good at the thing, but was sort of hedging his bet as to whether, I guess, family influence was part of it, but knowing himself was part of it. And I think that was what I was hearing when he was talking about talking to young players. Because you couldn't have talked Sachs out of having the career that he has. He was going to do that his way in the time that it made sense for him to do so.
Yeah.
And that's the students not all of them, some of the students who struggle, it's because they were good at this thing, like their ability outpaced their passion.
Yeah.
Ooh, that's profound. I better take a nap. I need to go to bed soon. That's definitely the best thing I will say today.
Well, we should do what I've been in rehearsals with Lance in a variety of settings, but I've been in rehearsals where somebody will say, let's run it again. Lance will say some version of why, like, it's not, sometimes it's why, but sometimes it's just like, why, like, what do we, like, is the main goal to just play it again, like, okay, like, but why, what do we, so we should just keep talking until, well, Michael Sachs, as he said in his practice mantra, like, it's like, make nothing worse, right? Mm-hmm. Was that do no harm, do no harm. Yes. Yeah. I threw that in the show notes.
That's the musician's Hippocratic oath. First, do no harm.
Yep. So it should be a teacher's, and like all the above. So good stuff. Yeah, love me some Michael Sachs, and thank you to everybody. The bonus episode, by the way, was absolutely priceless. All I'll say is, like, young Michael Sachs, Madison Square Garden, Hell's Angels. That's all I'll say. So yeah, that's really good stuff. That was one of the best stories that we've ever heard on this thing here.
And a David Lee Roth impression. Don't forget.
He literally did an impersonation of David Lee Roth, which, if that's not worth, like, if I were you, even if you don't want to support us, you should pay $5, listen to it, and then cancel. Yeah, because you can do that. There's another, we'd love for you not to do that, but you could totally do that. That's what I would do. If I needed to. So it's good stuff. So it needs to be a ringtone. So, all right, Lance, I will miss you desperately.
Oh, that's the best way to miss me.
And that is going to do it for another episode of The Brass Junkies.
You've been listening to The Brass Junkies on the Pedal Note Media Podcast Network. If you would like to hear the bonus episode featuring today's guest, please visit patreon.com/thebrassjunkies to learn how you can support the show and instantly access all bonus materials, as well as gain access to a special patron-only Facebook group. The Brass Junkies is produced by the amazing, wonderful, and truly inspirational Will Houchin. The theme music was composed by Fernando Dados and performed by Andrew Hitz and Lance LaDuke. We are at Pray for Jens on Twitter and Instagram and have a Facebook page at facebook.com/prayforjens. You can find out more about the Brass Junkies and all the other Pedal Note Media podcasts at pedalnotemedia.com. This has been a presentation of the Pedal Note Media Podcast Network.